This is Heron Lodge looking at it from the front, now in its raised position. It's not quite finished yet, there's still a little bit more work to do, but you can see the front area now where you can park vehicles. It's level, able to park and keep the vehicles out of the flood water, and get the cottage more or less finished, and it's now able to weather any flooding that might occur. My name is Peter Johnson. I'm the owner of Heron Lodge. The property I found originally in 1998, discovered that it was up for sale and decided to purchase it. But during the inquiries of the property, I found that the property was prone to flooding. It's situated in what is known as the Dee Valley floodplain. It's the largest floodplain, natural floodplain that is, in the whole of Northern Europe. It's a very little reported fact. You tend to hear about the floods in the Severn and around Shrewsbury and the lower reaches of the Severn, but you never really get to hear anything about the Dee Valley floodplain, so it was quite surprising to find that fact out. On inquiry with the local planning authority about all the work that I wanted to do to the cottage as my future retirement home at that time, and also the factor of defending it from flooding, and I was advised by them to contact the Environment Agency North Wales Flood Defence Manager's Office and to take advice and recommendation and permissions from them to do the necessary work. I've got to compliment these people at the Environment Agency. They were extremely helpful, gave me good advice and came along to the site and recommended the height to lift the whole property to prevent it from flooding, and that height was to give me a predicted 60 centimetres of freeboard above their worst predictions for flooding in this particular area of the country. Next came the problem of trying to decide how to raise the property, particularly the structure, the building, the Heron Lodge. And what I decided to do was to excavate down on the two narrow sides of the cottage, that's the front and the rear of the cottage, and to sink four holes, a metre square, a metre down, filled with heavy duty cement to form four sacrificial jacking pads on each side of the cottage. I hired 8 20-ton jacks. I positioned 4 specially welded or restructured RSJs into 4 28-foot lengths. They were dragged under the cottage, having been excavated underneath to form space for them. They were dragged under the cottage and placed in position above the 8 jacks. Then set about jacking each of the points up an inch at a time until I was up around about 10 inches, 11 inches, and at each of those stages, and there were 6 stages, I constructed a course of reinforced concrete blocks. So in actual fact the cottage now sits, and you'll see some still pictures of it both before, during and after, and the cottage actually sits on 8 concrete block legs. Up to 1.353 metres, I think, in accurate measurement, which was to get to the predicted level that the Environment Agency Flood Defence Manager had given me. On conclusion, or during conclusion, I then set about bringing in the approved ballast from an approved site by the Environment Agency and raised the garden area up to more or less the damp proof course level of the new level of the structure. It's been particularly difficult. We had a few problems on the way through, but finally achieved it. My problem for the last 5 years has been fighting the local planning authority, because after I'd raised the whole property, they took enforcement action against me to make me remove all of the ground. I think the term was to remove all of the infill take the ground back to its old level and reseed it with grass. In other words, reinstate the garden that was constantly waterlogged anyway, but bring it back to that level, which was absolutely absurd. I've spent that period of time going backwards and forwards to the High Court trying to appeal this measure, because it was upheld, strangely enough, by the Planning Inspectorate, which is a twin department of the Office of the Deputy Prime Minister, as the Environment Agency is. So I got one department within government telling me yes, you can lift it and how high to lift it, and then another department within the government upholding the enforcement notices saying to take the ground away. The whole thing has just been an absolute nightmare, culminating in Tuesday the 4th of July before Lord Justice Richards in the High Court, when he accepted all of the evidence that was putting forward that the local planning authority were wrong, and all of the evidence that the inspectorate was wrong, but concluded in saying that I'd run out of time, I was too late to be given an appeal under section 289 of the Town and Country Planning Act, and as a result of that I've now got to uphold the enforcement notices and remove all the ground around the cottage, which will mean that when a flood comes through I'm going to be marooned in the cottage. Some of the video now is going to go on and show you the conditions that I've had to contend with and the actual situation that I've now achieved with regards to the raising of the property and how I can cope with the flooding that does occur. Flooding occurs about 5 times a year. Sometimes it's quite a small flood, doesn't even cover the access route to the cottage, and then another time it can be 2 or 3 foot out on the access route, and it's a matter of going in and out of the village, or getting in and out to the village by boat, and then occasionally in chest waders. The video goes on. It was actually taken during December 2006 on one of my daughter's visits, and it actually films the access route to the cottage, and actually how easy it is to get in and out of the property now with the boat. It's worth noting this flood in December 2006 was the longest flood of my records of flooding in the area since 2000, and this actual flood lasted for a total of 18 days before it finally receded and got back to normal access by car and by foot.